Ending homelessness in the U.S. by 2020 will require us to make significant improvements in the way our homelessness systems function. The department has developed a set of 7 system-level measures to help communities understand their system's performance. This video features measure 6 of the 7 and explains why the measure is important, how it is calculated, and how you might consider using the measure locally. This measure is required only for CoCs who have been approved by HUD to serve persons who are homeless under Category 3 of the homeless definition. Currently, no CoCs have been approved. Without HUD's approval, people who are homeless under Category 3 are ineligible for CoC program-funded housing and services. So let's look at who's covered. Category 3 covers families with children and youth or youth under the age of 25 who are considered homeless under other federal statutes because of their living situation, but who are not literally homeless. These federal statutes include the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, the Head Start Act, Violence Against Women Act, and the Department of Education section of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. If you want more information, we encourage you to look at the summary of these statutes on the HUD Exchange website. To receive CoC-funded services or housing, families with children and youth who meet the criteria under any of these other statutes must also have some additional characteristics indicating that they have barriers to obtaining and maintaining housing. These characteristics are that they first must not have had a lease or other interest or agreement in permanent housing in the preceding 60 days, must have had 2 or more moves in the preceding 60 days, and must be expected to continue in their housing instability because of a disability, a history of domestic violence, or various barriers to employment. So let's look at a family and see whether they're considered homeless under these other federal statutes. We're going to use this chart of the other federal statutes to quickly evaluate households' Category 3 eligibility. Barbara and her 2 daughters live with Barbara's mother, since Barbara lost her job 9 months ago and then was evicted from her apartment. She's been sick and hasn't been able to look for work. Barbara doesn't meet any of the other categories of homelessness because she isn't living on the streets or in shelter, doesn't have to leave her mother's place within 14 days, and isn't fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. But if we look at the other federal statutes, we see that she would be considered homeless under the education section of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act and the Head Start Act, because she's sharing the housing of other persons because of the loss of housing and economic hardship. Because we've determined that the family is considered homeless under the first statute, we can then go on to determine if they meet the other Category 3 criteria. Remember that to meet the Category 3 definition, she has to meet all 3 of these criteria. She hasn't had a lease in the preceding 60 days, but she hasn't had to move twice or more in the preceding 60 days, and we don't know enough about her disability or employment history to see if she has the level of barriers that would contribute to a continued housing instability. So reviewing all our answers, we can see that the family does not qualify as homeless under Category 3. Now let's look at Bob, who's 19 and hasn't been in touch with his family for some time. Recently, he's been couch hopping, but he can never stay with anyone for more than a week. He's never had a regular job and didn't graduate from high school. Bob is considered homeless under the education section of the McKinney-Vento Act and the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act because he can't live with a relative and doesn't have a safe alternative living arrangement. He meets the other Category 3 criteria because he hasn't had a lease in his name and he has had more than 2 moves in the last 60 days. With his employment and education barriers, he also meets the criteria for continued housing instability. So Bob would be eligible for CoC-funded assistance in projects that have been approved to serve households considered homeless under Category 3. So that's how you determine whether people are eligible for Category 3. Now let's talk about how CoCs get HUD approval to serve these folks. CoCs who would like to serve people under Category 3 must demonstrate to HUD that the use of CoC funds to serve this group is an equal or greater priority than serving people who meet the other definitions of homelessness. CoCs must indicate the specific projects that will serve these households in their request. And the types of projects that are allowed to serve people who are homeless under Category 3 may be limited in the NOFA or other notice. Only 10% of the total funds awarded to the CoC may be used for this population. HMIS vendors will program their systems to allow providers to indicate which projects have been designated to serve this population and which households fall under Category 3. The measures themselves are very similar to the other performance measures, but the biggest difference is that the measure only covers certain households who meet the Category 3 definition and who are served in certain projects approved by HUD to serve them. So the universe of clients is going to be much smaller than for other measures. So now for the calculations themselves. Under Measure 6A, we're looking at returns to homelessness after exits to permanent housing, similar to the process to calculate Measure 2, but again, with a limited universe of projects and people. So let's look at a picture from the video for Measure 2. We need to remove shelter from this picture because this Measure, 6, only covers approved CoC program-funded projects. So then we add rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing projects to the list. The people who are homeless under Category 3 in the approved CoC-funded projects are designated by color. 4 of these people move to permanent housing. Of these 4, 1 loses her permanent housing with friends and family and returns to a shelter. So in this case, 1 out of 4 people in Category 3 return to homelessness after exiting to permanent housing for a rate of 25%. Also, like Measure 2, Measure 6A calculates returns to homelessness within the 6 and 12 months, and then Measure 6B looks at returns within 24 months. Measure 6C looks at successful exits to permanent housing and also exits to or retention of permanent housing, which is very similar to Measure 7B. So we're going to start with 6C1, which is the change in the rate of exits to permanent housing destinations. We just need to remember that we're only looking at the projects approved to serve people who are Category 3. So we'll take the shelter projects in this picture from the video for Measure 7 out. The remaining CoC-funded projects have 2 Category 3 households who are designated by color. And in this case, a family has exited a rapid rehousing project to their own rental housing, and another person exited transitional housing to permanent housing with family and friends. For this measure, 100% of the people exiting the project successfully exited to permanent housing. Once you have more than 1 year of results from this measure, you'll be able to look at whether there's been an increase in the percent of people in Category 3 who are exiting approved CoC-funded projects to permanent housing. So then for the second part of the measure, Measure 6C2, it looks at changes in the rate of exits to or retention of permanent housing for residents of CoC-funded permanent supportive housing projects who were Category 3 at project entry. So we'll start again with a picture from Measure 7. The people who are homeless under Category 3 are designated by color, and we can see that of these 3 people, 2 have exited, 1 to shelter and 1 to public or assisted housing. So the person who remained in PSH is considered a positive outcome. And then we add the 1 person who exited to permanent housing for a 67% rate of exit or retention in permanent housing, or 2 out of 3. So the person exiting to shelter did not meet the permanent housing outcome. This measure is also calculated every year, so you can see if there's an increase in the percent of people who are homeless under Category 3 who exit to or are retained in permanent housing. Check out our videos on Measure 2 and 7 to understand the ins and outs of these calculations. And as CoCs are approved to serve Category 3 folks, HUD will provide more guidance on this measure. So that was Measure 6. Next up is Measure 7, housing placements and retention.